All right, Jen Davenport, you help people with burnout. Is that right?
I do, Luke. That's my specialty.
So, do you mind just telling us how you got into this and how you help your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, primarily because I was there, a completely burned out executive, at times working 20 hours a day, thinking it was the only way to get it done, and quickly came to the realization through a couple of failures that it's incredibly counterproductive to allow ourselves to get burned out. So I decided to take all of those learnings along with some of my learnings through my graduate degree in psychology and postgraduate studies in human behavior and kind of weave those together into an offering for clients to really help them overcome this need to feel like they're the ultimate answer. That's what really leads to burnout.
Mm-hmm. So, what was going on? So, how many years ago was it? And what was going on that led you to burnout? You said 20-hour working long days. What kind of work was it? And
Yeah.
what was,
So,
yeah.
Most recently, it was, about 4 years ago, achieved a promotion into senior VP at a technology startup. And so it was, my dream job, was really excited to have the opportunity and felt like I needed to prove myself. And I was number 5 on the ground with that company. And there was so much to do, so many things that needed to happen. And I felt like I was doing something great for the company, but really ultimately became a risk to the business because I wasn't saying no to things that I didn't have time to do or that I didn't necessarily have the right skill set to do, and felt like I could brute force my way through all of those requirements.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, the tech startup world. That's basically when I realized I was having a real burnout problem and a real problem with anxiety. I was working at a tech startup on a financial software as a software engineer, mm-hmm. and working long hours, and then also trying to do like a business on the side. And then I was also I was engaged, planning a wedding. And one day I just fainted at my desk at work, and that was kind of the sign that I'd maybe gone a little over the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, some of the obvious symptoms of burnout was, I'm obviously a woman, but pretty strong woman. Things can typically roll off my back, but I came incredibly emotional. The least little thing would just trip me, and I would let it fly. And relationally, family relationships were really strained. I was in a marriage that ultimately dissolved, partly because I prioritized work over everything else in my life, because I just felt this need to get that approval, and fear, I really believe, is kind of at the source of burnout. That's kind of where burnout is born from.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was really obvious that I was burning out. For someone who doesn't have it so obvious like that, how can someone know that they're maybe approaching burnout or already there?
Yeah. So a couple of different things that I look at. One is, really being on edge emotionally, right? So if you're seeing an obvious departure from your typical nature, that's a really early indicator that something's going on. Looking around at the people around you, feedback that you're getting from family, from important relationships, from your peers, from your boss. There are a lot of external indications that something's happening, but most importantly, it's good to look internally. If you're feeling anxiety, if you're not sleeping, if you're falling asleep at your desk, if you're feeling really low energy, those are all early warning signs that it's time to take a step back and evaluate what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking of, I had so many warning signs that leading up to when I fainted that and I was trying to do everything but address the problem directly. I was getting into biohacking. I was like taking supplements.
Yes.
I was doing everything except the important things, which were let's work on the anxiety. Although I didn't even know any real stress relief techniques. I was doing meditation. I knew a little bit about this whole world of biohacking, but it wasn't really clear to me what I needed to do. And so, like when you work with someone who's dealing with burnout, what are some of the first things that you try to help them with?
Yeah. So mindset is hugely important when you're dealing with burnout. And, I always tell people we focus so much on doing, but everything really starts with being. I believe the natural order of things is be, then think, then do. And we tend to, in our culture, in this hustle culture, we do things first, and then we think, and then if we have time, we can be. And we rarely have time to be. And for me, that's kind of what leads to burnout. And so, quite frankly, when I start having that conversation, a lot of people will put their hands up and say, I don't have time to be because I have so many things to do. And I point them back to, well, that's exactly the problem. You have to sit and be. You have to start with, why are you even doing this? Why do you think? Why do you have the belief or the mindset that you have to grind it out like this to be successful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super relatable. It reminds me a lot of what I was thinking at the time, because there's these irrational beliefs that I came across. A therapist I worked with around 5 years ago had told me about him. He called them the 10 irrational beliefs. They're by this guy Albert Ellis, and one of them was, I must be thoroughly competent and adequate in all things that I do, or something like that. Yeah. And the rational belief was more along the lines of, while it's desirable to be adequate and competent, what's more important is to focus on self-acceptance and on loving instead of being loved, and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's so counterproductive to ignore self-love and to ignore the requirement to accept yourself, because if you don't, you end up creating a scenario where you're proving that you shouldn't accept yourself. You go into this vicious cycle of creating outcomes that only reinforce you're not acceptable. And that's that's the ultimate outcome of burnout. You fail. And so that's really why I just think going back to that mindset and the underlying reasons why burnout is acceptable to us is the way to really get ahead of it and to really heal from it. I think burnout is something we have to heal from.
I'd like to take a quick break to tell you about my new app, Pocket Breath Coach. Pocket Breath Coach helps people relieve anxiety with slow breathing exercises. Slow, deep breathing has been shown in multiple studies to relieve anxiety, lower blood pressure, and help people fall asleep, and it even helped me to overcome my own severe anxiety. Pocket Breath Coach comes loaded with lots of breathing exercises that have helped people to relieve anxiety, such as box breathing and 4-7-8, but you can also customize the exercises. So if an exercise feels too slow or too fast, you can adjust it to suit your needs. You can also select your favorite sounds and animations to choose the ones that help you feel the most relaxed. It has a sleep timer so you can drift off to sleep while listening to the calming guided breathing. It's free to download for Android and Apple devices. You can find the link to it in the podcast show notes or go to pocketbreathcoach.com. Now, back to the interview.
How long does it usually take people? Like, how long did it take you once you realized you were burning out to start feeling kind of normal and productive again?
Yeah, well, it took probably a good 6 months, I would say, because I had to work with a therapist myself, even though I'm an educationally trained psychologist, right? Even though I'm a life coach, even though I know these things. it takes time to heal. And so it took a good 6 months of really understanding the behaviors that were underlying why I chose to allow myself to become burned out. And there were some deep things in there that I needed to work through. And awareness is the first step. It's not the last step. So then you have to work through that process. But I call myself a recovering burnout junkie, right? So it's something that I continue to work with consistently. And I, working with clients is reinforcement to myself to stay out of that space. That's one of the reasons why I love engaging with and helping people through the process. It's self-healing as well.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. Sometimes I just making YouTube videos or tweets or anything, it's kind of just helps me think through the stuff. Trying to explain it to someone else helps me understand it better for myself.
Absolutely.
And then it's also, the content helps me because I don't like to phrase things when I'm making content. I try not to phrase things as in you should do this, or because that's kind of what led me to burnout too, is these should statements saying I should be, the top programmer at this company or whatever I was thinking at the time. So yeah, I really like making content has made it a lot easier to internalize some of these things. And I probably started making content too soon, honestly, because I had my fainting spell. I think it was around March of 2018. And I started making YouTube videos probably in the fall of that year. Basically, as I started learning things, I was like just trying to make them into YouTube videos, but
sure,
it made me a little more passionate. So I liked the way you said that. You got to be, then do, then
be, then think.
Be, then think, then do.
Right. Doing is the last thing that we should focus on. I believe being is really all about that deep spiritual connection, whether you call it to your higher self or to God or the universe. But that's really where the truth of our existence is going to come from. That's where our identity comes from. And that identity then informs our beliefs, or that's what, I believe we should be gleaning our identity from. I think most of us tend to get our identity from what we experience or from input from other people who might have an underdeveloped consciousness, right? And so we come across all these ideas like you have to be the best, you have to be perfect, you have to be overqualified, you have to be all these things you should be. And we hear this consistently over and over. And instead of really sitting with the truth of our identity and connecting very deeply to our purpose, we ingest all these shoulds and we immediately run off and start acting and doing on that information versus just letting our identity resonate within ourselves and creating our set of beliefs and values, our mindset, our thinking off of that, and then acting and doing out of that set of beliefs.
Yeah, I really love that. Because when I think about some of the things that led to my burnout, it definitely was taking like a defensive stance towards things, not starting from that being point. One of the things that I was dealing with was people were telling me what to do. And even if I didn't agree with it, I would give a tiny pushback. But if that didn't work, I thought it would make me look bad if I really, really expressed myself. So I would just kind of do it. And it, like you were saying, you had trouble saying no to things.
Yes.
What's some advice when you're in that spot where you're trying to push back, you're dealing with other people who are kind of putting their beliefs on you, and you're trying to push back in a professional way that doesn't make you look bad in the end?
For me, I have struggled in the past with that's one of the things, being able to really stand up for what I believed in. And first, it's all about controlling your own emotions. You can't respond if you don't have control of your emotions. You can only react. And that immediately puts the other person into a defensive position. So making sure that you're thoughtful in how you respond to things, and trying to focus on the win-win. So if I want to do something in the way that I think best, I frame that in the way that's going to be beneficial for both parties in the discussion. And then the other is expectation management. So I had to learn that I can't change a donkey into a racehorse, right? So I can't ever expect that the person that I'm engaging with is going to be different than they already are. I have to adjust the way I engage with that person to get the outcome that I want, instead of hoping or pleading with them to think about it differently.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Can't change a donkey into a racehorse. And then the win-win part, I think I was a little younger when this happened. I was 27 or 26 when it happened, when I had fainted. And one thing I didn't realize back then was if a manager is like being hard on me and like kind of pushing back, where I'm like, hey, let's cut back this project a little bit. I don't know if we're going to meet this deadline. And they would maybe not be willing to cooperate. I didn't realize till later that maybe they have their own boss who's pushing down hard on them.
Yeah.
And as I dealt with the anxiety, it became a little easier to see things from other people's perspectives. But I love the idea of the win-win, because that's some of the things I think helped me in the later years to realize, hey, this guy's got a boss too. So let me talk to him from that perspective, that, I'm trying to make him look good, him or her look good as well. And so if he's feeling stressed, it's probably not because he's just, it may not even be that he's just a donkey. Sometimes it is, but it could be that he's got someone who's given him a hard time and it's just getting passed through to me. And having that context. So I love thinking about it from a win-win as far as dealing with a difficult person at work.
Yeah, one of the really important things that I've learned over my career is ask questions before you respond even. Well, if the manager's coming and saying, hey, we need to slow this down, we're not going to make it. Well, why do you think that? It's always easy to just, and it gives you the opportunity to really think about how to frame your response to get that win-win. So gather as much context as you can, slow down. And when we're anxious, when we're in that place of fear and burnout, it's so hard to just take the breath and ask the question. And again, it just all goes back to mindset. And for me, it was just so important to pull myself out of that fear mindset. Like I grew up as a child to parents who grew up in poverty, and the mindset was always work hard. If you work hard, you won't be poor, right? Mm-hmm. So it was always about this hustle and grind. And I just had to learn that there's a different dynamic in that, wellness and prosperity and joy is my birthright. It's part of the reason why I'm here, why we're all here, to enjoy this life and to pluck that fear of being poor out of my mindset and replace it with something else. And it really has enabled me just to take that pause and ask the question, because I want everybody to be joyful and well and prosperous, right? And so how can I be an enabler to that for everybody? How can I be part of the win-win?
Yeah, I think that's so helpful. The thing about the assuming, you mentioned that. Did you ever read a book called The 4 Agreements?
I did. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the 4 agreements is never, I hope I'm getting this right, I kind of want to look it up. Is one of the rules, never make assumptions?
It's something like that. Yeah, we should look it up. Let me Google this really quick, because this is a good thread to pull on.
Because I feel like those beliefs, the 4 agreements, are really in line. Yeah, the 3rd agreement, don't make assumptions. Yes. And so, and I'll just read these off for people listening who haven't read the book. But The first agreement is be impeccable with your word, which is basically speak with integrity and only say what you mean. Number 2 is, I think all of these go in line with what we're talking about. Number 2, don't take anything personally.
Yes.
And so if someone at work is being rude to you, it's something to do with what they're dealing with.
It's more about them than you, 100%.
And then that goes straight in line with number 3, which is don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
And it's so easy. And it's so easy just to ask for clarification. And
Yes.
and I love asking. I was just talking to someone else the other day who was saying that he helps people, or one of the advice he gives to dental assistants, because they'll be working with a patient who's like, they'll use these all or nothing statements where they're like, my whole head hurts, or this is never getting better. And he says, you can just simply ask them, your whole head hurts? And they're like, yeah. And then they'll be like, well, yeah, it's like right over here. It turns out it's not their whole head. It's actually a smaller area, but just kind of in a delicate, and I guess you still have to be delicate when you're questioning people like that. But so it's so easy just to ask the question than it is to assume they're just being an asshole, I guess. But
yeah, rather than assuming they're a donkey, right?
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I'll always ask the question and be prepared with a thoughtful response. It really equips you to be prepared with a thoughtful response.
mm-hmm.
I think, one of the things that's so important as you embark on this mindset shift journey is really developing compassion and empathy, because asking questions is really the most compassionate and empathetic thing we can do, because it shows the other person we really care about
Mm-hmm.
why they want to do whatever it is they're proposing. It shows them that we're interested in creating an outcome that's beneficial to everybody.
Wow, I've never thought of it that way, but that sounds really true. Just hearing it, that asking questions is compassionate. Another thing, I've still got the 4 agreements pulled up, and seeing the 4th agreement, which I think still goes in line with burnout. Number 4 is always do your best.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the quotes. So he's saying, always do your best, and then you did your best. But I remember one of the quotes was, you always are doing your best, because if you could do better, you probably would.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know, that gave me a lot of that book. It's a short book too. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's really popular, but it's still, I feel like it's not that well known. I know Oprah's pushed it a lot, and she's done interviews with the author, and
it's
but I love the 4
huge
agreements
in the mindset community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I probably read that book, I don't know, it feels like it was 15 years ago. I don't know if it's been quite that long, but it was life-changing for me. And I've read it again a couple of times. I actually just made myself a note to read it again.
Mm-hmm.
It never gets
Mm-hmm.
old. And it's you discover nuances every time you go through it that you haven't picked up on before. But yeah, I think it's an incredible book to promote.
So we'll put a link down to that. Any other books that have really helped you dealing with your burnout, or have helped your clients?
Yeah, there's a book that I read recently called Power versus Force.
Okay, I've heard of that one, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, and so the first half of the book really focuses on, mindset and kinesiology as a means to determine the truth of any belief that you hold. So for some people, it might be a little bit woo-woo, right? But regardless, the meat of the book is incredible. And just thinking about the title, Power versus Force, for me, envisioning force means that I'm always going to experience a counter force, that there's always going to be resistance. But
Newton's
if I
third
think
law.
about power flows. And so we always want to be part of the flow. So that's one of the books that I recommend to everybody that I work with. I actually came across that book in yoga teacher training.
Oh yeah.
It's been amazing, even in the last few months, in advancing, helping me to advance through some personal situations I've been dealing with as well.
Well, I'll definitely check out that one. I'm going on a vacation Friday, and I was kind of wondering what book I'm going to bring. So I'll check out Power versus Force.
I read it while I was on vacation in Jamaica. It's worth it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I like the way you described force, because that like goes in line with the physics definition of force, that there's always an equal but opposite force. So if you're creating a force, there's something pushing back, equal and opposite.
Right. And everything is energy, right? Whether it's material, where we can touch it or feel it, or whether it's just pure energy or emotion. Trying to force. And think about when you were in love with somebody who didn't love you back, right? We've all experienced that, right? And trying to force ourselves to or force them to love us only repelled them further, right? Or think about how you engage with your dog, right? The more you chase your dog, the more it's going to run away. But if you turn your back on the dog, more than likely it's going to say, hey, what is she doing? I got to go check it out. So those are some of the analogies that I use with my clients to help them understand this concept of power versus force.
Wow, that's really a good analogy, because it works great with dogs. You're chasing them, they keep running away. You turn around and run away, they chase you. And it works the same in relationships too.
Exactly. I read a really funny book. It's been many, many years ago, that says how to train your man in 7 days or less, like from a well-renowned dog trainer. And the guy I was dating at the time really didn't like it, but it's true. And it's not just for romantic relationships. It's just this dynamic of energetic engagement, right? And usually if we're chasing after anything, we're chasing from a place of fear. And anytime fear is involved in anything, it's related to an underdeveloped ego. We're trying to survive something. And when you're focusing on anything out of fear, you're not going to get the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's really nicely put too. Some of that made me think of, again, when I was leading up to that burnout of fainting, I told you I was trying everything but dealing with the actual problem. And so I remember I got into like manifestation and law of attraction, and they do have some good ideas in that, but I think it can be a little scammy, of course. But I remember one of the things was like, you kind of have to, once you decide you don't want your goal anymore, that's when it gets easier to obtain, or when you kind of let go of that intense wanting of it. Because it's almost like wanting it is like you're reinforcing that you don't have it.
Don't have it, yeah. Yes, exactly. And I mean, it's all about shifting the focus a little bit. And, my focus, really, my specialty is on professional burnout, but I'm the go-to person for all my friends' relationship as well. And I was just having a conversation with one of my friends yesterday, and she called and she said, my guy is doing this and he's not doing that, and I'm not getting this and that out of the relationship. And I said, well, maybe if you just shift a little bit to being grateful for all the wonderful things about that person, instead of harping on the things that you don't like, it makes room for expansion of the things that you do want to receive out of the relationship. The law of attraction, yes, I think in and of itself, it can be a little tricky, right? It can lead people to believe they just have to sit and shift their mindset. There's always action that comes after. Again, be, think, do. And the law of attraction for me is sort of that middle space of that mindset shift that then enables you to take appropriate action or appropriate doing. But there are some good principles in there for sure. And gratitude being the foundational one of really, finding things to be grateful for in every scenario and taking the focus off of the lack. I mean, for me, burnout was because I didn't want to be poor. And so I was always focused on what do I need to do to not be poor? And I was ignoring the fact that I've been a multi-million-dollar earner over my career. So I'm not going to be poor. It was just that reel that was stuck in my head that I chose to put the focus on. And as soon as I learned to redirect to gratitude for everything that I've learned, for every skill that I've achieved, for every dollar that I've ever earned, it was freeing. It became such an incredible dynamic in my life to really continue to put the focus on gratitude for what is. And it sounds a little squishy, but it really does. If you apply the principles day after day after day, you can see the results that come from that.
So on this idea of being, sounds like gratitude is a big part of that. When you're working with someone, you're trying to help them start with just being. Do you ask them to dedicate some time in the morning or during the day to just focus on the feeling of gratitude, or think about things they're grateful for? Or
yeah, one of the first things that I ask people to do is to go through the exercise of the 5 whys. So why are you doing things the way you're doing them? And you get to a why and you drill it down to what's the root belief. Then I ask people to flip the script to whatever that root belief is. So my root belief was, if I don't, I'll be poor. And so I wanted to flip the script to, I'm so grateful that I've earned whatever the flipping the script is, and just sit with that, even if it's just for a minute a day, to let the truth of my existence sink into me, versus the experiences or mindsets that were fed to me by other people that didn't even belong to me. So I really do believe sitting and being, even if it's just a minute a day, is super important to sort of starting that journey out of burnout. Everybody can afford a minute a day.
There's definitely a minute a day. I had a hard time with that early on, with this idea of gratitude, and I couldn't even figure out what it was. Like, I was into meditation. I'd heard this of gratitude and appreciation. And then I learned some techniques that helped me feel gratitude. And then one of the things that I heard that helped me really realize what it was, they said, think about how you feel when you're petting your dog.
Yes.
Or dealing with a cute animal. That's the feeling that we're talking about. Or that was the most relatable for me. Are there any other ways to help someone feel gratitude for the first time if they're not sure even what it is?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'll take my clients through is a focused breathing exercise, because breath is something we really take for granted. And so just doing, a focused breathing exercise where you begin to feel the breath, notice the breath coming into the nostrils. What does it feel like? Coming into the nostrils, how does it feel as you hold that breath? And where do you notice that sensation in the body as it's leaving the body and exiting the nostrils? What's the difference? And it just draws awareness to something that we take for granted every day and allows us to develop gratitude in that way. We can develop gratitude for the ability to breathe, for our bodies that we become aware of through that practice. And those are just really basic things. And what I've noticed over the years is gratitude is expansive, and things that I had grown jaded to or had become commonplace in my life, I've learned a newfound gratitude for those things. I remember when I was in that state of burnout, people in my life would say, "Oh, come listen, come look at the sunset." And I was like, "I've seen a million sunsets. I'm too busy. I can't do it." Right. And now I'll be driving my car and see the sun setting and just be overcome by how beautiful it is, because again, gratitude is expansive, and just taking the time and learning the process of becoming grateful is a starting point to something much larger and more beautiful in your life.
I love breathing exercises. I don't know if I told you, I just released an app that helps people do slow rhythmic breathing.
Yes, I downloaded it. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Really, really glad to hear that. The slow, deep breathing, focusing on the breath, that was, I tried a lot of things after I fainted. I did therapy. I took some antidepressants, and it really helped me with a lot of the mental stuff that was going on, a lot of the habitual thinking patterns. But the breathing helped me with the physiological side, which was that last piece that I was having a lot of trouble with. And so combining the gratitude with the breathing just made such a difference. So I can't recommend the breathing enough for anyone dealing with burnout, but
yeah, it's huge. And even, going back to that recommendation that you ask questions when someone is coming in a professional setting and they're, recommending something to you that isn't sitting right, asking them the question gives you the opportunity to take a couple of breaths too. It really allows you, if you feel that anxiety welling up because you've been presented with a difficult situation, take the opportunity, ask the question, take those deep breaths, because it really is an anxiety tamer.
Yeah, it really is, because the heart rate, your heart rate will spike so fast when you get those tough questions. And it makes such a difference. Just take that second to take that long, slow exhale, let your heart rate come down by 10 beats, and then say what you want to say. Absolutely. It just comes out so much better.
Absolutely. Meditation is a really interesting one for me and some of my clients as well, because, people who are prone to burnout are prone to anxiety and just the constant flow of thought in the brain, right? And everybody's like, I can't meditate because I can't empty my mind, and I just get so consumed trying to control my thoughts. Well, you can't. Nobody can control their thoughts. And so it was really important for me to come to a place of acceptance, right? We are not our thoughts. We're only observers of our thoughts. And so that they don't have power over us unless we let them. And so I've really had to learn to sit with it. And whatever pops into my mind, I just observe that it's there, and it exits so much more quickly. So I'm sure, thinking about power versus force, and force having an opposite and equal force or counter force, anything that you resist is going to persist. I'm sure you've heard that in the mindset community as well. And it's the same with our thoughts. Trying to fight it is only going to make it persist more. So I want to sort of dispel the myth to people that they have to control their thoughts during meditation. It's impossible. Just observe, give the thought permission to flow, agree with the thought that you'll come back to it later, but it's not serving a purpose right now, whatever you have to do, but give yourself permission to accept that you can't control your thoughts.
That's well put. Give yourself permission that you can't control your thoughts. And then that makes me think of, so I used to just identify with my thoughts, like one-to-one, my thoughts are me, I am my thoughts, there's no separation. And that's one thing meditation definitely helped. I think you were talking about the idea of thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky.
Exactly.
You can kind of just watch them come and go. And it's so funny how you can have a thought that you get wrapped up in, and you get all anxious about it, and you're thinking all these scenarios, and then next thing you know, you don't even remember what you were thinking about.
Right.
And so once I that's one thing meditation helped, to see these thoughts that I got wrapped up in, and then I'd be like, wait a minute, what was I so upset about a minute ago, and I can't even remember. Or so the meditation is that the basic one of the meditation techniques you like, just focusing on the breath, trying not to associate with thoughts? Any other kind of meditation techniques that you've liked or recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So, not to get overly religious, but, there's a scripture somewhere that says, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened. And so I believe that's true. And going back to just being, I think the beginning of being is to sit in meditation. And I always think it's helpful to have an intention and ask a question as you go into meditation, right? And so setting that intention and asking the question, journal, just write it down, keep your journal close, and then journaling whatever answer comes through, and trusting the goodness of the universe, that the answers that you're looking for will be provided. And sometimes it's as simple as, why can't I be grateful? Write that question. Sit. Why don't I feel gratitude? And I believe that that is a super helpful activity that leads into the journaling, which is another thing that I recommend to my clients.
Wow, that was that put me in a state just hearing you say it that way, because whatever it will, if you look for it, if you ask the question, you will find it. Maybe not right away, but
setting yourself on a path is obviously the first step. Like I said, the awareness is the first step. But getting on the path, along the way, you're going to uncover those nuggets that you need to uncover. That's going to ultimately get you out of burnout and to a more peaceful state to achieve your goals.
Wow. So if someone wants to work with you, if they think they're approaching burnout, or they're already at burnout, if someone wants to work with you, how can they find you?
Easy. Jen Davenport 369 at gmail.com. JenDavenport at 369 at gmail.com. And I'm happy to share my phone number with you as well, so you can share that with anybody that might reach out to you.
Yep, I'll put your email in the description of this podcast, and
absolutely. I'm happy for you to share my phone number as well.
Well, that sounds great. So if anyone wants to work with Jen, I've had a great time talking to you. This is my first time meeting you, but I've had a great time talking to you. You seem like you really are passionate about helping with burnout. And everyone I've talked to so far, when I ask how did you get into this, it's always the same. I got into this because I was dealing with this problem, and I solved it for myself, and now I like to help other people with it.
It's a super painful and frustrating place to be, and so I don't want anybody to be stuck there. And if I can help somebody avoid full-blown burnout, that's something that I want to do. I also have a Twitter account. My handle is at I am a masterpiece. MASTERPEACE. So my goal is to really help people master the art of peaceful living.
So I'll put a link to your Twitter down there as well. And it's a great Twitter account. So if you're on Twitter, I recommend you follow.
Thank you so much, Luke. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, definitely. Thank you.